If you're listening on podcast, be sure to tune into Wild and Weird West Virginia for additional content on our YouTube channel.
Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, a Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast.
Previously on Wild and Weird Radio.
This is going to be a series of episodes. There's a lot of information. We will be reading from official documents.
They were looking for people with extraordinary mental abilities. Vallée believed that there was a mask involved with this phenomenon. PUTHOFF formed the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group. The creation of an abductee database, as well as obtaining direct physical or psychical contact with the UFO phenomenon. 180 patients who had unusual medical issues following a close encounter with UAP, because the data is there, and that's kind of what we're trying to show here. UFOs are not a threat to national security. So Green and Nolan try to identify this gene, which correlates with anomalous experiences. ALSAP was very, very interested and believed that you could communicate with this non-human intelligence. Identified that the anomalies represented a non-pathological neural feature. Certain psychical individuals who have been, switched on, so to speak, as they were trying to do the UAP interaction. They also indicated that ALSAP and BAS was successful. This is important. They were successful in making contact by deploying, quote, especially adaptive people as human interactive agents.
Former Senator Harry Reid stated in reference to the successor program, it's extremely important that information about the discovery of physical materials or retrieved craft come out.
There was another observable, which they were more reluctant to discuss. And one of the most disturbing aspects of Green's experiencer study is the fact that 25% of the individuals in his test group within 5 to 7 years had died. So that's kind of what's happening with this exposure. What he's referring to here is the work by Kit Green and Garry Nolan. And we're going to explain to you why, when you're out there and you see one of these orbs, you might not want to run up to it.
Welcome back to Wild and Weird Radio, and this is part 2 of last week's episode. You guys have already dug in, and the response to it has been fantastic. You're only halfway through, guys. This is the rest of it. Again, we are skipping the news. To give a brief recap, Ron, why don't you take it away?
We left off last week with that 6th observable, and we're just going to start off right there with that. If you haven't watched last week's episode, I suggest that you watch that, because it's probably not going to make much sense to you unless you do. But we're at the 6th observable that Luis Elizondo mentions about these UAP and the UAP phenomena. And that was in a 2020 interview with the New Republic, where he mentioned that 6th observable. And the 6th observable is one that they do not like to talk about, right, Joe?
Right. It's a scary one, especially, with Dr. Green and his studies. And when you combine it all together, it creates a rather terrifying picture.
Yes, it does. It actually shows that there are morphological changes in the body, in the brains of these individuals. And that is, as you mentioned, we'll find that out by Dr. Christopher Green, as well as Garry Nolan, who will come into play in a bit as well.
Well, what we're talking about here with the 6th observable, of course, is the biological effects that the human body undergoes under exposure to the phenomena.
To some of the phenomena, right?
Correct. Not
some,
all.
or I should say some aspects of the phenomena would
Yeah,
probably
it seems
be more
to be
accurate, right?
That's the way I've read it as well. It does seem to be, it's very specific. You have to come in direct contact almost.
Yes.
Or be in one of these situations, as we mentioned in the previous episode, where you are in a sighting experience and it turns the night sky to day.
Right, exactly. And, we heard that mentioned in actually one of the first reports. And that's kind of, and that's where Nolan's research was pointing into as well.
And you can understand where that comes from, because with such a dispersion of light, that is a lot of energy. If you think about something that is powerful enough to turn the night sky to day for the individual, the viewer, we can have these brief effects with really strong electrical storms, but this is something that turned it to almost daylight for a good moment,
Yeah,
and the amount of energy output that
what you just said,
what you're exposed to, is very dangerous.
Yeah, we see it as light, but there's more coming off of this than just light, and I think that's the big thing. Most of these people who have seen these UFOs, and most of them are nocturnal lights, as Hynek would have said back in the day. Distant lights glowing in the distance, in the sky, in the woods, wherever, as with the orbs. But we see it as light, and there's more things going on, is what we come to find out. So anyway, it's important that we talk about the players here. Christopher Green, we've talked about him before, but
yes,
Christopher Green is very important to this story. The release of Green's DIRD, that was the Defense Intelligence Research Document, and I believe that we actually put up a link up to that as well in the previous episode. And that's what prompted us and others to begin actually looking at this phenomena in a different light, rather than just going out and chasing UFOs and orbs, right? I mean, we decided to invest a little bit and get some equipment and kind of be precautious, as well as collect data.
Correct. And we're going over Green's work first here, because this whole 2-episode thing is all going in chronological order. And Dr. Christopher Green's work in this aspect of the exposure and whatnot, it kind of laid the foundation for what Dr. Nolan wound up picking up and taking the bar and running with. And
they both worked together on this project in the end.
They did work together. And so Green, he worked for the CIA between 1969 and 1985. His curriculum reads as follows. He was the senior division analyst of the Office of Scientific and Weapons Intelligence. His role was the multidisciplinary research and management and experience in medicine, comparative biology, bioengineering, animal and human physiology, endocrinology, and life sciences. He had the perfect playbook, much like Dr. Nolan does now, in his background. He's got the resume that you want for an individual who is going to be conducting this specific research. He has all the cards in one deck.
Yep. And basically, he was to review the neurological tissue, the damage to this neurological tissue, and to write this up. And we now have that as the intelligence reference document of the clinical, medical, acute, and subacute field effect on human dermal and neurological tissue. That is the, I think it was released last year.
That was the title of his paper.
Yeah, it was a very lengthy name to say the dangers of getting too close to UFOs.
Correct.
Yeah, because that is exactly what it says, pretty much. And it goes on to actually talk about these exposures. So the definitions that we're going to talk about in this are the near field. The definition of near field, it was deliberately left subjective, but generally referred to objects within sight of the injured. Okay, so basically you see a light in the forest, as in one famous case we'll talk about later. You go up to that light, you just exposed yourself, right?
Yep.
So the patient and Dr. Green's and his cohorts often describe the anomalous systems as small, drone-like objects. That's important. The focus of the study was on cases where symptoms appeared within hours, acute or days, subacute. So like we talked before about Joe and his friend who were out on the beach, that was immediate. They had that, right? Yep. The exposure. And then the next morning he wakes up.
The sunburn-like effect.
And the next morning he wakes up and he has the sunburn effect. So that would have occurred a couple of hours later. But sometimes it could be, days or weeks later. So
according to Dr. Green's early work, this is one of the things that I find the most interesting, because this was work that was being performed in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And a large percentage of the individuals suffered from a combination of radiation burns, thermal injuries, and permanent hematological and neurological damage.
Yes.
That means, in layman's term, they suffered permanent blood damage, tissue, like damage to their blood cells, permanent damage to their brain cells and brain tissue, radiation burns on their skin. So this is the dermal injuries, your visible injuries, and thermal injuries, meaning burns. These effects were so intense that it wasn't just radiation burns, but they actually seen thermal burns, like just from basic normal heat, almost like you were being exposed to some form of an exhaust.
Well, that's kind of what it sounds like, doesn't it? It sounds like we're talking about an exposure to some form of output, some energy output on these things. It's not like it's a weapon, It's more like you just walked in front of a jet.
Yeah, pretty much. You're walking right in front of the turbine as it fires.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, according to his research, is it possible that Green's work could explain these blue, yellow, orange orbs or ball of light phenomena that we're seeing out in the forest?
Right. Well, Christopher Green's DRD refers to the potentially dangerous effect of the phenomena known as blue shifting. So being exposed to the blue shifting at relatively close range can result in symptoms associated with broadband radiation. Now, Joe, what that means, broadband radiation, is if I have my own little portable HARP array here and I point it at you and I turn it on, you're going to get, 1.8 gigawatts to the brain. And if I'm close enough to you, I'm
plus
gonna
5 rads.
Right. I'm going to exactly. It's going to radiate your brain, but it's going to be EM radiation, not beta or gamma radiation, but EM radiation. Okay. So that's basically being too close to the, to the output of whatever this thing is, the antenna, so to speak, on the bottom of one of these things. So the concept of, go ahead.
No, you're good.
The concept of blue shifting is detailed in a highly technical DRD written by Dr. Hal PUTHOFF. Imagine that.
How about that? There he is again.
Really? It just blows my mind. Entitled Advanced Space Propulsion Based on Vacuum Space-Time Metrics Engineering. I don't know where they get these names. I really do not.
Right?
Yeah. It's like, could you not come up with something a little more, I don't know, hidden? I mean, they're speaking in this coded language, that only they can understand. We know what they're talking about,
So as you can imagine, this blue shifting, it's speaking about a visual cue that you can see during this encounter. And PUTHOFF writes that this is a shift in the ultraviolet and soft X-ray generation due to blue shifting, which is the term that they coined, of the visible portion of the spectrum to higher frequencies. So when this object, it's speaking in physics here, when this object transitions from one mode to the next, or one phase to the next, there is an energy dispersion that takes place that is visible on the light spectrum because it is shifting the ultraviolet radiation around it. And the soft X-ray generation is caused, and this forces what we can visibly see to shift, which is what blue shift.
Yeah, and that's what we've always said. We said before, are some of these UAP sightings just the after effects? I mean, we're just seeing what I said before, like the wave, right?
Yeah.
In the ocean. You're just seeing the wave. You're not seeing the boat. You're not seeing the ship. You're just seeing the wave.
Well, and then you've also got some of these really good videos, like some of the ones out of Brazil, that you're seeing these UFOs in the sky. You're seeing these UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them. 'Cause in one place, they look as if they are a physical metallic object, and then all of a sudden, gone.
Yeah.
And just before you get that takeoff, if you freeze it and watch it frame by frame, you can see this sheen go over it.
Mm-hmm.
How else do you explain that? Is it one way you could look at it is that this object is moving and the light coming in from our sun is reflecting off the dome, or if we're looking at it using the DIRD here and what Dr. Green had said, then this is the blue shift that he's mentioning. We're actually witnessing that effect. We also see it in many of these nighttime videos of actual UFO or phenomena, because you'll see these orange balls that seem to shift from orange to green to blue, orange to green to blue, and then before they disappear, they generally fade out to green or blue.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Bob Lazar originally say that when he witnessed the craft being tested, that it made no sound, but it emitted a soft glow around the bottom, I believe?
There's an aura.
Yeah, an aura, something like that.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, so PUTHOFF explained that the blue shifting phenomena it's somewhat more of a layman's term that during his lecture in 2018. He said, in this room, he told the audience, most of the radiation coming off our bodies, off the walls, etc., is in the infrared. Humans can see things in the visible range, but you and me both know we can't see things in the infrared range unless we have a viewer, right? But what happens if you get into a volume of space where the vacuum has been, and this is important, engineered in a way that I've been discussing? He said the infrared you don't ordinarily see can get blue shifted up into visible. Now, the downside from this is the fact that the visible light, which doesn't have any particularly harmful effects, alpha, etc., gets blue shifted up into the ultraviolet. So if you get too close to a landed craft, you might get a sunburn, or off into the soft X-ray region, there could be a chance of radiation poisoning. So if you run across one of these things sitting on the ground and it's powered up, I'd recommend you don't rush up to it. That's exactly what the man said. And he's right.
And he's talking about this based off of an actual interview with an actual case. It is very, very famous.
Yep. Because in 2018, John Burroughs participated in a panel discussion on UFOs on the UFO News Network, and several bombshells were dropped during this conversation. It seemed to have gone largely unnoticed by the UFO community as well. One of the claims made by Burroughs was that he had been given a briefing on Project Stargate and taught techniques to enhance his psychic abilities during a visit to Hal Puthoff's Earth Tech facility. In Contact Modalities, Grant Cameron mentions that Christopher Green had also urged Burroughs to practice Kripalu Yoga and Vipassana meditation. What?
Okay.
Why?
Well, if you go back and listen to last week's episode, I'm sure you're probably going to start picking up on a few cues here.
Yeah, I mean, basically what we're talking about is putting your mind in a state, right? I mean, that's kind of where we're going with this. And yes, yoga and meditation, particularly almost any meditation, not just this, but any meditation will relax your brain, put it into that beta and theta state where you can actually receive such possible information, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it opens you up to what could be coming in. Essentially, what Kit was telling these guys, and what he was being suggested to from Dr. PUTHOFF is to become an antenna.
Pretty much. That's the word. It just opens you up. And I'm going to just guess. I don't have any proof whatsoever, but I'm going to guess that they were also referencing the Gateway Project findings at this point. That would be my guess, based on what they were saying about the yoga and the meditation, because that's what the program was trying to establish, was a methodology to initiate these remote viewing sessions and going beyond. So let's go up to August 2022, just last year. A massive UFO disclosure is about to happen at Stanford. Professor Garry Nolan claimed that the government has been covering up the suspected UFO visits in possession of technology that has been coming from another planet for decades. Dr. Nolan contacted important people in the government who have closely investigated UFOs and asserted that they are about to disclose some information. Now, if this were someone else, we could just probably brush this off, right?
Right.
I mean, I would just be okay with that. I mean, we hear this stuff all the time. It's, how many of these stories like this do we not let go through on the group page, for example?
Yeah, there's several. I mean, over on the group page, I delete probably 50 posts a day.
Yeah. Aliens have landed, top scientists say. This isn't the Weekly World News, and this isn't some scientist say. This is Professor.
This is the scientist saying with his mouth in interviews. You can go look him up on the record. Yeah. And this is really when we're first on the grand stage introduced to Dr. Garry Nolan.
It really is. And now we know that Dr. Nolan, he traces back to all of this. And he's been involved for many years now at this point. And he's coming out and he's saying what he's saying. And he didn't say, which is interesting. If you watch some of the interviews with him, he's very careful. He's very, very careful because he's still, a big guy. He doesn't want his career to be tarnished by this, and he's really coming out just enough to where he's waiting, I think, for someone else to make that next move as well, is what I think. I think he's laying the groundwork for whoever's going to come next.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say that, but if you watch some of the interviews that he's been a part of, he's not laying groundwork. He's taking a sledgehammer to the wall.
Well, when they ask him what his personal opinion is or his personal feelings, yes.
Yeah.
But he's also a man of data. You can see that on the Tucker Carlson interview with him. He was just flat out, I'm going to talk about what I know. And then when Tucker asked him, of course, about, his feelings, he would go into that. But
even before the feelings, just we're referencing that interview alone.
Fascinating interview.
He dove into Rendelsham Forest with both feet, which is something that so many people have tried to debunk over the years. And he is saying that he has essentially irrefutable proof that it happened because he worked with the veteran that was in contact with said craft and touched said craft and suffered the side effects.
Yeah. What I found really another neat thing about Nolan is that he was involved in the Atacama story as well. The skeleton. Remember the little alien skeleton? He proved it was an alien, but that's how the CIA found this guy. And his story just reads like it reads like some kind of a novel. It's this scientist working on these crazy projects, and then the government finds out about him and they're like, hey, you're the only guy on earth who literally has this. And that's what they told him. Your machine is the only one on the planet that can do this, and we need you and that machine. And that's what they were doing. They were going in there and investigating some of these these sequences and whatnot on these people. It's just, it is mind-blowing is what it is. But on August 21st, 2022, Dr. Nolan had an interview with Ross Collett on the Australian news channel, where he discussed his role in working with the government on analyzing and studying individuals that encountered UFOs. According to Nolan, there's a group of people that were involved in recovering UFO debris for secret government programs. And these individuals will soon be coming forward to reveal what they know. Now, I want to back us up here just a tiny little bit, okay?
Yep.
What he just said, this is before we found out that there was going to be legislation passed or proposed at the time that was going to stop the non-disclosure agreement issues and some of these secrecy acts that are really gagging some of these UFO witnesses for decades and decades now, right? So he literally just said right there, he knew that was going to happen. He knew that bill was going to get passed.
He's obviously working at a higher level than we are.
Definitely, definitely.
He's got access to this stuff, and also anybody who has read into and watched this whole thing unfold before they even talked about introducing the legislation and amendments to repeal these gag orders, essentially, we knew it was going to have to happen because it is the only way that some of this data is going to be released out to the public is for those things to be rescinded.
Yeah.
And, it just is what it is. So he's up there, he knows it's coming. So he's just telling everybody, and almost everybody who's on our side of the fence was like, that makes sense. We figured this was coming with the trending of everything. This is the next logical step.
It is. This is the phase. And, we knew it was coming, like you said. But how this all shakes down is why are these things so dangerous? What are the symptoms, I suppose? What are we to look for? What did they find out? That's what I'm asking you.
It's got to be dangerous at a large scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, there'd be no.
Yeah,
let's look at this as an example of what's going on currently in the food market, right? Eggs are off the charts crazy expensive right now because there was an avian flu outbreak in one of the big mass producers in the United States. What happens in those cases is that every one of them has to be incinerated and destroyed.
That's right. This happened with cattle before too, as I recall.
It has happened with cattle, with the bovine, they called it the mad cow disease.
That's right, back in the day.
So with that said, looking at that, they have to make public statements. They can't just let people try to wonder, well, why are eggs $11 a dozen? The people aren't going to.
They won't take it.
They won't take it. So you have to tell them what happened.
Came through if you didn't catch that.
What is it?
Little Twisted Sister came through there for a second.
Oh,
we're not going to take it.
What happened there is they had to come out with a press release to explain what's going on. This is no different. We are having individuals now, which is being proven at a mass scale, even though it's not like a large population. Almost all the people who've had close encounters have had tremendous side effects.
Yeah, and here's a bit of how that all broke down. Several years ago, 3 previous fit and active individuals experienced an anomalous, irregular, incongruous, and inconsistent with their domain. It basically means that they had an incident that shouldn't have happened while they were working. See how they like these words? These are just fantastic. An aerospace-related event. So within 72 hours, they suffered medical signs and symptoms, acute and subacute effects. These included almost immediate erythema, which is the heat redness. That's erythema there. You're thinking about arrhythmia, which also happens as well.
Yeah.
So, exactly. So physiological and psychological issues. They had overexposure to the skin, and it was all from a source of an electromagnetic radiation. So the skin had varying degrees of the following as a function of the body's surface, exposure, and time: fever, pain, headaches, numbness, paresthesia, diarrhea, loss of hair, and alopecia. Skin eruptions, boils, cardiac palpitations, arrhythmias, etc. Beginnings of what were to become chronic headaches and symptoms of insomnia and other sleep and dream disturbances. Moderate to occasional severe anxiety and insomnia. I think we just described the last generation, basically, of everyone, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so everyone's a contact. Congratulations,
You never
guys.
know.
You just never know. But two of the persons who also experienced photophobia, which is the extreme sensitivity to light. We talked about that before. That was one of McGonagall's friends who had it for decades after. Dry, scratching eyes, extreme inflamed bloodshot sclera, whites of the eyes, with soft tissue swelling of the eyes. One of the three experienced moderate blood dyscrasia and signs of radiation illness, and over several years developed signs of malignant transformations, i.e. cancer. Extensive but controversial investigation revealed that three had been subject to an accidental exposure in the near field meter to broadband ultra-high radio mixed radiation frequency range, the NIEMR, which is non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation and microwave energies, including non-specific and unmeasured induced ionizing effects, probably mixed with UVA, UVB, UVC, ultraviolet A, B, C, centered at about 785 megahertz. Now, what that big mouthful right there just said, basically, is these guys were exposed to extreme amounts of non-ionizing radiation. So, non-ionizing radiation, what is that, Joe?
Ionizing radiation is your alpha particles, beta particles, things like that, things that we can block, right?
Well, technically, we can, but there's also gamma and X-ray, which we can't.
Right, we can't block gamma and X-ray. It passes straight through you.
Yeah, so that's your ionizing. But your non-ionization, we experience this every day. I mean, this is IR, it's radio frequency, RF, it's ELF waves. You know, it's all around us. A little bit of you turn the microwave on, you just exposed yourself, but you didn't expose yourself to that much.
Right.
So
plus, you've also got a lead screen in your microwave.
There are these things. There's a Faraday cage in there. There's all kinds of stuff for that. But an extensive review of the medical literature and a compilation of the database had revealed an additional relevant but less dramatic 42 cases. I'd say that's relevant. From the peer-reviewed medical literature, an additional unpublished similar 300 cases. Guys, these are peer-reviewed, by the way. This isn't just some guy who is saying all this stuff himself. This is a peer-reviewed literature that these guys are passing around that has this information in it. But primarily, when fields were measured or emitters were known of mixed exposure, 1 to 10 gigahertz, the power densities of 100 megawatts per square centimeter, that's a lot, guys. 100 megawatts per square centimeter, that is a lot. When you were talking, Joe, you said, they were out there and, they see this light hundreds of feet in the air and, night turns to day. Well, yeah, that explains the kind of exposure that we're talking about here. This isn't just, someone turning on, say, like an EM pump or something like that. This is a massive amount of electromagnetic radiation. And being that close to it, I mean, you're getting cooked.
You're getting cooked.
I'm saying you're getting cooked. And what's more important that they don't go into is when something like that does happen, we know that that's near field exposure. Well, the far field, that still goes out. So these are detectable events is what I'm getting at right there.
Right.
So, this could be picked up somewhere down the line by other equipment. And I do believe that is what they were talking about in the recent report there last year about wanting to build some of these UFO or UAP detectors.
Yeah, but you got to remember the people that were talking about that were idiots too. Like the ones that were talking about it in the hearing.
Oh, those guys. No, yeah. I'm talking about like Avi Loeb, who wants to basically go that way with the Galileo project.
Right. He's wanting to build his own thing.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the people in the hearing.
Don't even talk about that fiasco. That was an absolute.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a whole hour and a half on how bad that was. If you want to go back and watch it, you can.
Right.
We kind of dissect that. But, you know, what's really great is one of those guys is responsible for some of the stuff that's going to be coming out this year. And
yeah,
kudos to him. That was really awesome.
He was the highlight, the only redeeming quality about that
really
entire mess.
He really, really was. We should try to get him on the show one day.
We
really should reach out to him.
So the evidence discussed includes scientific material that had been peer-reviewed, and it contained in recently declassified government documents. The early emergent clinical medical analysis also underway in companion research studies. Based on historical cases, humans have been found to have been injured from exposures to anomalous vehicles, especially airborne, and when in relatively close proximity.
Whoa. That's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah, continue.
The primary mechanisms of injury are related to electromagnetic radiation field effects, EMR field effects. The biophysical characteristics of the injuries are well understood. The energy related to propulsion systems are not well understood. The potential deployment of systems is important to understand this material. So, sufficient incidents and accidents have been accurately reported and medical data acquired as to support a hypothesis that some advanced systems are already deployed.
Well, okay. Let's just think about what you just said. I almost feel like we're in Sunday school church and we're dissecting verses here, but that's kind of what you have to do with these things. They said a lot in those past few paragraphs, in this first few sentences right there. They admitted, first of all, that this has been measured.
Yep.
They admitted that it is not well understood, that it is advanced. And if it's that advanced and they don't really understand it, well, where'd it come from?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you really do have to look at that. And a lot of people do not look at these things that way. They just read the words. And it's like, oh, okay. But if you really pay attention to what they're saying we don't know what this is or how it works. We only know it is there. We understand that these injuries happen because of exposure to this, but we don't know what this exposure is coming from. And that's,
well, it seems to be that they understand where the exposure is coming from because they mentioned it right here. It's related to the propulsion systems.
Of what, though? That's what I'm getting at.
We don't know what
we don't know
is.
what.
I mean, we can allude to what it is, but I'm sure they all know what it is.
Oh,
they just don't know what it is or where it's from.
Yeah, but you can see the careful wording is what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They told you just enough. But, you know, the other part, I don't know. I mean, there are people who think that they know. There are people who think they don't know. That's neither here nor there in this discussion. This is just a discussion based upon the facts that have been released at this point. Next week, we'll get into the fun stuff.
Amongst the most important pathophysiological effects are heat or burn injuries, ionizing and non-ionizing thermally induced neurological effects to cognitive or central nervous system, neuromuscular, and central and autonomic nervous system, and sensory peripheral nervous system, and neuropsychiatric, neuroendocrine, auditory, cranial nerves. It affects everything that your brain is connected to.
Yeah.
The entire hardwired system of your body can get absolutely jacked by being exposed to some of this radiation.
Well, even chronic low strength is what they're saying here.
Yeah.
You know, as well as high strength electromagnetic fields can cause this. So it's pretty harmful stuff, right? That's what we're trying to get at.
Oh, yeah.
And the data supports that some of the chronic low level effects alter the ability of cells to function properly due to the epigenetic effects, which is damage to the DNA, RNA, protein regulatory pathways independent of chromosome disruption. And simultaneously, they alter the metabolism of dividing cells, especially the neuroimmune system. The same will hold true for exposure to toxic chemicals, biological, and nuclear material. So this is what we're basing it off of, because we have these test studies from what I just said there, you know, the toxic, chemical, and biological, and nuclear. So we're saying that these are similar effects, right?
Right.
Wow. Isn't that something? So we know that they have these test subjects. These are the test subjects that they have. They've gathered, they admitted, we have hundreds of people. Well, where'd they come from, bud?
They come from all over the world. A lot of them are military.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are known cases that we're all familiar with because we've listened to them on In Search Of or Unsolved Mysteries, or seen them on UFO case files, or heard about them at anything after 10 p.m. on the History Channel.
There you go. Exactly.
So one of the most notable cases where all of this pulls from is the Bentwaters event, also known as the Rendlesham Forest incident. This sighting began in the early hours of December 26, 1980, when 3 U.S. military personnel spotted lights above Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, United Kingdom. They described a triangular craft that had landed. This event occurred over a strategic military base containing, you guessed it, nuclear assets, guys.
Who would have thunk?
Never in a million years
Not
would have
me.
crossed my mind.
No.
The deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, was at a function at RAF Woodridge on the 28th of December when a police officer came to the report the aircraft had returned. This is number 2.
Mm-hmm.
The report goes as follows. I saw something glowing, a red orangey object, and it was displacing sparks or molten metal. We watched it for a period of time. Then it silently exploded into white objects, sort of like fireworks, and then they disappeared. So we have that shift, the color shift that we described.
Mm-hmm.
Red orangey object exploded into white objects like fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
When he saw the lights again, they were moving in a grid-like search, Lieutenant Halt said. He does not know what he saw that night, but Lieutenant Colonel Halt is clear on one thing. The craft was under intelligent control. When we saw the object, we were in the forest. The glowing object came into the forest and moved through the trees, obviously avoiding the trees, occasionally bobbing up and down, but primarily moving horizontally. When we tried to approach it, it moved back into the field and it exploded. My personal feeling is that this is some form of another dimension or somewhere else. I wanted answers all along, but I'm firmly convinced that I'm not going to get them. Sergeant John Burroughs and Jim Penniston allegedly make contact with a landed craft.
Now, this is the part where it goes into Strangeland.
It really does.
And it's also important to understand, Joe, that this was a very big case in the 80s. It was on, I believe it was on Sightings. It was on Unsolved Mysteries. Yep. And so many debunkers went after this case, and they continued to go after it. In its recent anniversary a few years ago, there was a whole new wave of debunkers that went after this and said it was just the Americans messing with them with some secret thing. Guys, I want to tell you something about that. First of all, you fly over. If I'm the base commander, okay, I'm the base commander. You fly over my base, and I have nukes, and then I'm protecting the entire area with those nukes. Do you have any idea? I'm not going to let you fly over my base, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's not going to happen. You're going to get blown out of the sky. I mean, no.
There's so much anti-air artillery setting on these facilities that it's remarkable.
They would have scrambled fighters in 2 seconds.
Absolutely. In a heartbeat. Because this is the 80s.
Yeah. This was, height of the Cold War kind of stuff.
Sergeant Burroughs is the one that allegedly made contact with craft. And according to Penniston's logbook, they had found a landed craft. He received a download of information. There was even a point when Penniston claims that Burroughs simply disappeared for a brief period of time. This case has been targeted by debunkers as long as it has been around.
Yep.
From the minute it was reported, there were people who were instantly saying that this could have been this, it could have been this, it was a top secret aircraft, or it was just made up all in general.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They went so far as to say that I think Penniston had his little logbook, right? He had the wrong date in it. So obviously, because he had the wrong date, that it didn't happen.
They defamed and defaced these guys so harshly because of this that it ruined careers and ruined reputations.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Now, going back to Dr. Garry Nolan being on Tucker Carlson, he directly speaks of this incident. He mentioned that Burroughs had medical consequences following the event, and he tried to get help. The government wouldn't give him any time of day. The VA pushed him back. Surprise, the VA pushes back on everything. I'm a veteran. I hate using them.
Well, his records didn't exist. They said he wasn't in.
Yeah, he said he right. He didn't exist.
They
didn't have anything for him.
Yeah, he wasn't there.
So Burroughs had many medical consequences following the event, and he tried to get help, but he wasn't getting any help. The VA was turning him away at every turn, literally.
Well, it's because he wasn't a veteran. There was no records this guy ever serving.
His records were completely scrubbed.
Yeah.
But he had all of his pictures, he had all of his information, everything like that. And it eventually got to the point where John McCain's office got involved, and they were actually able to put a foot down and get him help where he needed it.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of ridicule that these guys went through, man. And that's why, everybody's like, oh, well, how can you keep a secret for 75 years?
Well,
Easy.
Talking about keeping a secret for 75 years. All right. We're looking at these things, and we're seeing how many times these people have tried to debunk this since the 80s. You have all of these different organizations and skeptics and whatnot that have rallied against Rendelsham for decades.
Oh gosh, yeah, for sure.
And now we have two people who sit on government positions who have both verified it, in Luis Elizondo and in here with Dr. Nolan.
Yeah, and we can't deny this, right? I mean, it's data.
Yeah.
That's data.
They're mentioning the side effects. They're talking about the incident that took place, and for the first time, and everybody just seems to gloss over this. All the people who debunked it are just oblivious to the fact that right now we have two government officials, or previous government officials.
Yeah.
Because Nolan currently is, and Luis Elizondo is no longer.
Right.
Technically, probably is.
Who knows? It's hard to say with Luis. Maybe we'll get him on the show. He can explain it.
Yeah, right.
He'll probably say something like
you have two people who worked at high levels in government security who are now verifying the Rendelsham Forest incident.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember when I first saw that little piece, and I'm like, this is amazing, because, you've heard for so many years people trying to debunk this thing. And then not too long ago, there's the photos that showed up that were supposedly from Rendelsham incident. Right. Well, those kind of went quiet too, which makes me wonder if, maybe those were real too. I don't know. But this whole thing, you just watch it like a puzzle, and it just kind of unfolds, doesn't it? But, aside from these occasional contacts, Bud, these inside military personnel and so forth, would they have tried to possibly use other people for these contact experiments?
Well, I mean, we covered that in last week's episode and other previous episodes here on Wild and Weird Radio, and that is a 100% affirmative.
Yeah, I think so too. I really think so too. But would they go as far as, say, trying to bait the phenomena?
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you look into some of these other programs, and you look at that big CIA release, and you see the verification of, oh yeah, this stuff did work. Yeah, these remote viewing sessions did work. Yeah, they actually worked too well, so we quit.
Or we moved it,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But I mean, if the DOD believed that other countries were actively engaged in trying to contact whatever this intelligence was, call them UAP.
Oh, you got to believe we're doing it too. Everybody.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Most people have now realized at this point that literally every world government is in a rat race with the other.
Yep.
On everything. They
really are.
Who's got the first subsonic rocket? Who's got the first this? Who's the first one to build a base on the moon? Who's going to build the base on the Mars? Who's going to put this satellite in this particular spot right now real quick?
Yep.
I mean, you're right. Every first world country is in this rat race to do the same things that everybody else is doing.
Yep. It's true. It's very true. But one prominent individual has spoken openly about his belief that the U.S. Navy is conducting baiting experiments, and that's Dr. Robert McGuire, former chief scientist at the Hume Center. A few months ago, McGuire posted the following comment in Scott Brown's Facebook group in the field. This is his quote. "This is absolutely clear. I have been aboard naval vessel carriers, destroyers, USS Blue Ridge, USS Hampton, Los Angeles class submarines, etc., doing intelligence missions. No damn commander risks their command without defensive action until and unless ordered to take no action. I believe with every fiber of my being that the Navy is conducting operations designed to get a response from the UFOs."
Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah. He offered additional context in a conversation with the well-known informed citizen journalist Danny Silva. Silva asked his opinion on rumors that the Navy is trying to, quote, tease the UFOs to come out, end quote. And that's what I claimed was happening with the USS Kidd, McGuire replied. Remember the Kidd incident, Joe?
Yeah.
We talked about that last week. Well, McGuire says that that is what happened off the California coast in 2019. He added, "The reason I say that is when you send a group of ships out like that, and that group of ships it just made no sense. They are support ships for a carrier battle group. So they went out, these cruisers went out, and all of a sudden these things fly right over the top of the ships. Some of them within a few hundred feet. We saw definitions of this. They were right over the deck on some of these things.
Yeah.
And for a commander to allow his command of the group and or vessels to expose themselves to dangers and take zero action tells me the rules of engagement are set before they ever went out there or they ever got out there." Yeah. So what he's saying there, Joe, is pretty much what I said earlier about you fly over my base, I'm going to take you out. This is a sensitive thing, right?
Right. I mean, they're telling you plainly in that sense that the rules of engagement are do not engage. But why?
Yeah, exactly. So why not, right? So what might the rules of engagement be? Because the Navy's ships lack the evasive action and willingness to defend themselves. McGuire believes that the most plausible explanation is that they were sent out there to poke the bear. I like that term, by the way.
Yeah.
I really like that term because the viewers of Mysteries of Skinwalker Ranch hear Dr. Travis Taylor say that from day one. Coincidence? I don't know. We'll talk about that later. But McGuire, I guarantee you, this is him. This is his words, his quote. "I guarantee you, nothing else makes sense to me. Now, I don't know the orders. Nobody told me anything classified, but it doesn't make sense. For those ships not to take any action whatsoever, hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, millions of dollars in trained personnel, and lives of the people that they hold in their hands, and they do nothing. No, Danny, they went out there to stir them up. They have a theory of how to do it, and it looks to me like they succeeded because they got a crap load of them out of the water." Okay. Yeah, literally, that's what we saw in the video.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of these things, and that makes perfect sense. And it also makes perfect sense to me why there were the reconnaissance team that was there so fast. The Snoopy teams were out there taking pictures. I mean, come on, guys. You got to think about this stuff.
Now, is this phenomena related to what we see taking place in the skies? Because this is clearly something that came out of the water here.
Right. Exactly. And there are those who believe that that's where they come from. I'm not one of those people. I'm just saying that, they probably utilize that as something, I don't know what. Maybe they did come from there. There's a lot of people who do believe that, by the way. And I don't mean like conspiracy theorists. I mean government individuals who believe that these things have, for lack of a better term, a base underwater, something like that, because the Earth is basically not Earth. It's water.
Mostly water.
It's mostly water, and, I think one of Nolan's primary things in that Tucker Carlson interview, if you go back and watch that, was that, and I loved it because, again, I've said this multiple times, whose planet is it anyway? He goes into that discussion and basically, It's not like it's not like these things have come from space. We don't have any evidence that they come from space, Joe. We have zero evidence they're coming from space. And a lot of the higher ups in the consensus at this point is they do not come from space, that they are coming from here. And as Nolan and other ancient astronaut theorists say, it's happened for thousands of years. This isn't new. This is just a new way that we're looking at it, and we're trying to figure it out and rationalize it for the first time. So one of the things that gave it a little bit more credibility and also brought our ears up a little bit and as to what we were doing in the field was when Travis Taylor came out and admitted that he was had worked with, the aerial phenomena task force, the unidentified aerial phenomena task force. And of course, everyone jumped on that and said, Travis Taylor, he's a public figure. Well, public figures can also, have lives.
Well, let's just say this. For a public figure,
do you want to read his accolades?
Travis Taylor is my favorite researcher and my favorite scientist. I was just talking to my wife about this yesterday. We were watching something that he was on. So I was like, oh man, I said, this is my favorite scientist. She was like, who is? I said, that right there is the redneck rocketeer. Yep. That is Dr. Travis Taylor. And he is a TV personality, yes. But he has a BS in electrical engineering from Auburn University. He also studied at the University of Huntsville in Alabama, where he earned his MS in physics in 1994. He earned his PhD in optical science and engineering in 99. He earned a MSE in mechanical and aerospace engineering in 2001. He then completed an MS in astronomy in 2004 at the University of Western Sydney before earning his second PhD from the University of Alabama, Huntsville in aerospace engineering in 2012. He has worked for various programs in the Department of Defense, for NASA. He has been a researcher on advanced propulsion concepts, large space telescopes, space-based beam energy systems, high-energy lasers, next-generation space launch concepts. He's also been involved with human intelligence, imagery intelligence, signal intelligence, measurements and signature intelligence, concept studies. He's briefly been the chief scientist on the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. He's also the principal research scientist at Radiance Technologies. So, yeah, he's a public figure, but he's also a freaking redneck genius.
Yeah, he really is.
You want to learn how to throw a rock at another planet, this is the guy to go to.
And and I do believe that's why the man got the call that he got.
Absolutely.
And I loved when this was announced and they all started to attack him and try to attack him, I should say, and say, oh, well, he wasn't, chief scientist on the UAP. It was just terminology. It was complete terminology. And that's all that they had. That was it. They couldn't do anything because everything he said was 100%. They didn't like the fact that, he's a cast member of Ancient Aliens. What can I say? I love that part. That made me so happy. You have no idea how happy I was.
Well, when you're reading off his laundry list of accomplishments and just credentials, earlier in Nolan's work, he was describing about how these pathophysiological injuries occur, and one of the things that he mentioned was the propulsion systems, and he also mentioned the high-powered lasers.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Taylor has a very strong background in high-energy lasers and in advanced propulsions.
Yeah, and if anybody watches, Mysteries of Skinwalker Ranch, they know this. I mean, the man loves lasers. He just absolutely loves lasers. He uses lasers more than anyone I've ever seen on TV, and it's really good entertainment. And rockets.
Rockets. He loves to build rockets.
He loves to build and blow up rockets.
Which is where he gets his nickname, the Redneck Rocketeer.
Yeah. So yeah, he's a personality, like you said, but
he's a great guy.
He's real. He's a scientist.
Real. He's an authentic human being, and just you can go and listen to all of these interviews with him that he's put in with these different agencies, and just it's straight up, guys. Mm-hmm. Like he doesn't make any bones about it. There's no fluff. He's just like, guys, listen,
this is what's going on.
It's great.
You know, to just really quick to end the discussion on Travis. I thought it was interesting. If you do watch the Mysteries of Skinwalker Ranch, you watch it from episode 1 all the way through. It's amazing to watch how the man goes from complete skeptic to having to accept, you know, that he's seeing what he's seeing. And, you know, they actually got it on video when he sees his first UAP, and the reaction is just absolutely spot on. I mean, and it's genuine, you know. And then you can just see his brain start to tick, trying to figure out, well, how does this work, you know?
Because he had seen numerous videos of UAP while working under the government wing. Yeah, absolutely. He had seen these videos, but when he saw his first one with his own naked eyes, and he saw it.
That's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyone who watched, of course, Ancient Aliens, the episode where they're looking at the Tic Tac video, and now that you look back at that and say, he knew he was working on that. He couldn't say anything.
Yep. He described it all.
Amazing, though.
He's like, this aura, if you look at this thing and there's an aura there, and
he knew exactly what he was looking at. Yes, knew exactly what he was looking at. He was pointing them and directing them. So he had already, it was just amazing. So I have to ask this, and this is probably something that a lot of other people have asked at this point. Who's really in control of this contact, bud?
I don't have a good answer for that, and I don't feel comfortable about answering that question, because if it's us, why? If it's not us, why?
Yeah. What's going on there, right?
What's the MO? What is the point? Like, are we trying to make deals with some hopefully altruistic or benevolent beings, or are they coming here and we're their ant farm?
I don't know. It's insane, though, to really think about it, because it kind of seems like if we continue on, that this phenomena takes many guises, doesn't it? I mean, it's not. We're dealing with more than one thing, and I've said that for years, and Dr. Nolan said the same thing, by the way, not just me anymore.
Right.
Colonel John B. Alexander shares George Knapp's perspective in the UFO phenomena, by the way. George believes that there's a little bit of a trickster element to it, right?
Yeah.
He says that in UFOs, myths, conspiracies, and realities, he argued that the phenomena acts like a trickster that's always in control of the observations. Just when researchers believe they are getting close to an understanding of a situation, he writes, the parameters are altered or new variables are entered into the equation. Dude, that's exactly what happened to us in Logan.
It is.
It is exactly what happened to us in Logan. It happens to Jesse and Joe all the time. The people who are in the field, this is what happens. And
this is what happened just the other day to us in the forest.
I don't know what happened to us the other day in the forest still, and I'm not really going to talk about that in this episode or maybe ever, because I don't know what happened.
It was weird.
Yeah, it was weird. It was very strange. We had some interesting, not missing time, but missing space, and that's very strange. But so my whole thing is that, Stan used to say the phenomenon is so strange it protects itself. Maybe it's designed to do that. I've said that multiple times too, and I'm starting to believe that.
Maybe it is a survival tactic. Maybe it is how it survives, is because it just, as soon as you think you've got the answers, it changes the questions.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you second guess yourself. Alexander coined the term.
Maybe the phenomena is actually Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Maybe. Could be.
Because that was his get up,
Yeah. That was
There's a throwback for some 80s and 90s wrestling fans, guys. Enjoy that.
1980s wrestling fans out there. You just You just enjoyed that. I hear you out there. All right. So Alexandra coined the term, and I love this term. This is a great term, and we really need to use it. PSP, precognitive sentient phenomena. That makes more sense to me than UAP. To describe the external controlling agents that initiates the events. The phenomena is not only in control of all factors of the event, he claimed, it is already precognitively aware of how the observer or researcher will respond to any given stimuli. They know what you're going to do. They know how you're going to react before you react. And that's exactly what they said with the tic-tac when it arrived at the cap point. Remember that whole discussion?
Yeah.
So it's, what do we know that does that, my friend? What is it that we know that tries to tell us stuff before we actually need stuff, or sell us stuff before we actually need stuff?
Facebook.
Right. And this can be denied all at once, by the way, and one day it may come out. But honestly, I understand the denial now, because
Facebook is aliens.
No.
Now I'm just disappointed.
They don't listen. They don't listen. They don't listen. It's not listening that's happening here. Yeah. It's algorithm. It's data collection. It's a building of a virtual you, and it has a pretty good idea of what you're going to want, what you're going to order. I mean, you can talk about a Lamborghini, and I guarantee you there'll be a Lamborghini on your phone in 48 hours.
I mean, based off my purchasing history on Amazon recently, it just recommended that I purchase an endoscope.
I can see where that would be handy.
Right.
Yep.
Also dowsing rods.
Nope. There you go. There you go. Exactly.
It knows.
It does know. And so that's what they're saying. These things know. And what I'm getting at is AI, an artificial intelligence, or a super intelligence.
It's able to process data in a speed that is just incomprehensible.
Yes. This isn't something that has to sit down and think. This isn't something that has to meet with a boardroom or a war room. It's something that's probably a collective intelligence, a collective super. Mind. Yep, a hive mind of super intelligence. That's what I think you're really dealing with out there.
Well, if you look back at what we filmed in Logan with In the Sky, I'm just looking. I can think, hey, why not? We have it. It's clear. Let's go. Boop.
Yeah.
Hey, look there. There it is. I looked directly at it. As soon as I looked at the sky, there it was. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it skirted across the sky. And what did it skirt across the sky to? More of them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, man. I really don't know. I'm just saying this. He has a very good point, though, that it knows whatever it is, it knows, and it's in complete control, which means that those things want to be seen. They're not just happy accidents to catch them, right?
Right.
So during these interactions, they decide when and where sightings happen. Bingo. Carl Vibe echoed Knapp's claim on day one of the Big Phone Home 2. There is something to all these stories that everybody sort of skips over, Bob said. Even the witnesses from the Nimitz encounter went home and had all kinds of paranormal incidents occur and follow them back into their home.
The hitchhiker effect.
Yes, absolutely. The author has also heard similar stories regarding the Nimitz pilots from a seemingly credible source. They won't confirm nor deny, by the way, yet. However, until they're publicly confirmed or denied by the pilots themselves, such rumors must be taken with a grain of salt. But basically what he's saying is that Lieutenant Commander Alex Ann Dietrich, she alluded to this being the case for herself in a tweet June 5th in 2021.
So when we look at the baiting of experiencers here,
where
we're using experiencers, people who have seen the phenomena, experienced the phenomena in the past. Dr. Nolan is actually quoted in saying that it's not been discussed in any of the meetings that he has ever been in.
Yes.
He's careful to say that. Anytime you see that this brought up, somebody's mentioned it, it's careful to say that none of the meetings that I've been in. Now, you can read outside of the lines with that, or you can just take it face value and say that they're not doing it. But he is, curious.
He is. And
So what that
Yeah.
would,
Yeah.
cause, how that would affect the phenomena.
or the perception of the phenomena.
Yeah.
Because he does go on to mention in that one interview that, these things at close range, there's a case where one of these things is seen following a vehicle. And, the lady is saying, like, she sees this big craft over the vehicle, and no one else in the car can see that. I think one of the other passengers takes a picture of the sky above the car. Turns out there's like a bright star-like object there, but there's not a big craft. And that kind of goes right in with what we have said about these screen images on some of these related phenomena, etc. He may have actually been the first to document or prove that, like Transformers, there's more than meets the eye here.
Right. Because all it takes, especially if you're dealing with some sort of super intelligence that has the ability to know where our prefrontal cortex is going before it does,
Right.
all it takes is just a subtle stimulation of the imagination library, according to Nolan.
Yeah.
To just take it on a wild train, and we're going to see Vegetable Man cruising through a field.
That's right.
With the not deer.
Right.
And you're not going to know what you saw.
Riding a unicorn. And you won't question it. You won't question it.
No.
At all.
It will be reality for you and what you're experiencing.
And
that the problem with that is it can break people.
Yeah, it can. Absolutely can. It does. It's been proven, actually. But so with that whole screen memory thing, Bud, do you know that Bass attempted to bypass that?
Yeah.
Somehow they were going to bypass the UFO deception and manipulation of the human perception by decoding its, quote, biological consequences.
Basically, what that translates to is they knew what the biological consequences already were. They were reverse engineering what caused those biological consequences, trying to create a shield that would repel these effects from the UFOs.
Well, they were trying to use the human body as a readout system, but they said that they didn't use people in these experiments.
Right.
Yet it says, in quotes, that they were using the human body as a readout system for UFO effects by utilizing forensic technology,
maybe
tools
these
of
bodies were
immunology.
doing science and they weren't people anymore. They were just corpses.
maybe it's possible. And I wonder if they just used humans. I wonder if they could have used, I don't know, cows.
Oh.
Just saying. We'll talk about that next week.
Other farm animals?
Possibly. We'll talk about that next week. Yeah. In Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, Lukotsky, Keller, and Knapp claim that no human experimentation was conducted and every aspect of HIPAA regulations were followed by all SAP, BAS, medical and scientific personnel. Perhaps so, but Christopher Green admitted to M.J. Baines that approximately a dozen of the individuals in his study suffered injuries in connection to their work at Skinwalker Ranch. So were any of those the result of baiting experiments? Well, we don't know, but we do know this. There are many people who were visited by orbs, men in black, experienced paranormal phenomena.
Later, when they went home to their family members, the wives and children would begin to see these things ahead of time. The one character in the book, Axelrod, is not his real name. We had to change that at the direction of the Pentagon.
Yeah, I like that part.
At the direction of the Pentagon.
Yeah, I like that too.
When we submitted the manuscript, he had his explosion of activity in his home that was seen by his wife. She saw this standing on two legs, a wolf being. There was a wolf standing in her yard across it, leaning on a tree, staring back. Evidence was found. There were tracks. There were claw marks on the tree. Her kids seen it, and they begin to scream. This thing runs off down the street, and they can see it running on two legs. It's kicking up leaves, and they didn't know what the hell to think about it, but there were other things that happened in the home. the book says.
Yep. Beings.
Shadowy figures were seen.
Yep.
They had a pet that had been, their own pet had been moved. They found their dog up on the roof one day. Tons of trickster type activity. This goes back to Patagonia or the Passport to Magonia. I just combined Patagonia.
You did.
Did you see that?
See what you did there.
But anyway, that goes all the way back into Passport to Magonia and Valet saying that this is a trickster type phenomena. There was all kinds of other stuff that happened, and these women would go back to their home, and there would be an immediate explosion of what you would call poltergeist type activity. They're not saying it's poltergeist, just that it's similar to that kind of activity being reported. Now, it just boggles my mind because this is like legitimate stuff. These are documented cases of people who have experienced these things, who have
objects flying across the room, balls of light showing up in their house, strange visions of shadowy creatures. These things.
And the stuff was so like this. The crazy thing is, some of this stuff was so intense that it caused one of the experiencers' fiancés to just be like, you know what? I'm done.
I'm down. Yeah.
And leave.
Didn't sign up for this.
And then that individual's activity continued for years after that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he goes on to say that pretty much anyone who was on the ranch, including him, they had these experiences. And Colm Kellner, he had experiences as well. His wife had experiences. Bob Bigelow's wife, and he had experiences as well. So these things just...
And now some of it's benign and some of it's terrifying.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But there are things there that seem to follow these people around that, it was almost like a contagion at one point.
And what's really interesting is that, they're stated as saying that, and quote, I tried to make this happen for a long time before I knew about the hitchhiker effect. I would bring things home from Skinwalker Ranch to my house to try to engage whatever it was.
That was George.
Yep.
George did that.
Bits of rocks, scrap, bits taken off the homestead, tiny little pieces, just trying to get it going. And finally it happened, and it wasn't pleasant. My wife saw these blue orbs floating over our house at night. She called me to come up and see them, but by the time I got there, they were gone. And then there was an experience in our bedroom where this thing came in, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that, but it was a very frightening experience for her, and it was very unpleasant, and she didn't want it to happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing about this hitchhiker effect, though, is that it was very, quote, reproducible. Going back into the NIDS era and the ALSAP era, they interviewed a lot of people, and all those people, quite a few of those people, had actually brought something home with them, according to what was reported. And just like everyone else, they saw orbs in their house. Yeah. They were having these strange poltergeist activities going on. What I found interesting was 5 out of 5. That's 100%. The military intelligence people who were deployed at the request of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, onto Skinwalker Ranch did, as George said, bring something home with them.
Yeah.
So these things were coming around, dude. And just, I mean, that's like you having some weird paranormal activity. I come into the house and then I come back here and things start floating around the room.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's an absolutely wild thing. And before we get too deep into it, because honest to God, the hitchhiker effect could be an episode all on its own when it really boils down to it. We have to look at these things and we have to ask ourselves the questions, how worth it is it?
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. Yeah. And what is the limiting factor of this?
Yeah.
We haven't discussed that. And they didn't discuss this either. What is the limiting factor of this kind of stuff? Where does it go? Where does it stop is what I'm asking you.
Right.
So in the terms of the reproducibility of this hitchhiker effect, though, I mean, they follow these people they know of in some of these cases, Bud, for 25 years.
Right.
So what is the limiting factor here? When does it stop?
When does it stop? Who knows, man? Like there are still people who are experiencing it to this day.
Yeah.
It's not stopping, period. It's almost like, well, okay, you want to come poke around, you're going to find out forever.
It's true. I found one of the most interesting things while doing this research was that the man who had who had started the modern UFO phenomena, Kenneth Arnold, in 1947. Did you know that after it wasn't long after he died, his daughter went on a radio show and she was talking about him, about his book, his life and whatnot. She started talking about seeing orbs in their home. And it said that, they experienced various poltergeist effects. Even Arnold himself in his book told about some weird stuff that happened. So this happens with these witnesses is what we're getting at. And we're seeing a constant pattern of this actually happening with the witnesses, which is absolutely, it sounds like science fiction, guys. It is not. We've got the documentation. You can look it up. You can believe it or not. It really doesn't matter to us. This is just the documentation. But in our opinion, it's very real.
So wrapping this all up, we're looking at the grand scheme, the big picture of all this. You're seeing U.S. forces, U.S. operatives doing their own study. We're also seeing various other agencies like Russia, the Soviet Union, back in the early 90s. They were doing the same exact thing. They were studying this just as vehemently, just as actively as we were. And so some of the reports coming out of the early 90s, it showed that the Soviet Union had this massive program that was being focused on gathering UFO data nationwide and on a national level. The government departments were involved as well at university departments. They were plugging themselves into educational institutions. They were plugging themselves into every aspect of their citizens' lives, trying to derive and pull data from them. Now, there was this military unit that they referred to as 73790, and that was involved, and it seemed to be the sort of linchpin for the entire investigation here. And there's been just mild whispers about this 73790 being sort of fundamental to the Soviet Union and later the Russian focus agenda. But Senator Reid was instrumental in forming this program. One of the really sort of alarming things in his mind was the prospect that another country would be gaining traction on the United States if we weren't making the move.
Yeah.
It was either going to be Russia, it was going to be China, it was going to be a litany of other countries. But they were gaining a technological edge if they were getting the resources and the data before we were.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what it was all about, wasn't it?
Yep.
I mean, we saw it from SIGN to Grudge to Blue Book to ALSAP to ATIP. These things, we kept making these programs and programs and programs. And let's bring us up to date to where we are right now. Yeah. So in close collaboration with the Director of National Intelligence, directed the USD and INS to form the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, AIMSMG, as they like to call it, as the successor to the U.S. Navy's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. Okay, that didn't last too long, because literally within just a few months, July 15th, 2022, the establishment of the Department of Defense, DOD, turned it to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the AARO. And that's where we are today. Now, let's look at that really, really close on those names, Joe. You did this with the one before.
Yep. So we're looking at this. It was the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, AIMSOG. We were looking at that group, breaking it down, Airborne Object Identification. That's very straightforward. They're looking at airborne objects.
Yep.
They are...
One could say that's a sign, couldn't they?
Right.
Okay, go.
You could. Now, this became, that was the successor for the UAP task force. So it went from being the UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, to Airborne Object Identification, to now all domain, meaning all domains, earth, water, sky, you name it. That is what, it was both of us. That is what this is looking at, guys. It's changed its name. It's now looking at all domains, space, dimensions.
It's also looking at a resolution for all domains.
It is.
One could say that a resolution could possibly be, we're going to resolve it.
Sum up a grudge, if you
possibly. So, as you had said before, Joe, Grudge 2.0.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. This is going to be a Grudge 2.0, I think, because the anomaly resolution, that means that they are looking to explain away the answers for these resolution or for these anomalies. They want to look at the anomalies and they're going to try their darndest to tell you it's swamp gas, that it's
airborne clutter,
some kind of radar malfunctions, some kind of anomalies, thermal anomalies that were being captured, anything natural that can be explained away. I think we're about to get it.
I think you're about right on that. The only a little bit of hope that we have are folks like Garry Nolan coming forward.
Yeah.
We have Green coming forward. We have these unknown individuals who are waiting in the wings to come forward now with this, the passage of this bill. So hopefully, just hopefully, they can't quite do that. And they will be held by Congress to actually produce what they are supposed to produce, rather than that pathetic excuse for a UAP report that we just got last week. That was literally a report. I think Corbell said it best. That was a report about a report. And that's what that was. We already knew everything in that.
That was just them saying, we have an obligation to do this. So here you go, public.
Yeah. And one of the things about it was on page 5, where they actually did say something to the nature of, after they tried to explain everything away, some of these exhibit advanced propulsion, et cetera, and cannot be explained and are still being investigated. Wow, we didn't know that. Thanks.
Surprise.
So I got to ask you, in the summary here on this data collection of these individuals, do you think that is still happening? We saw with Russia, they were going around to citizens and collecting data, bud. I mean, do you think we're still doing anything like that? Do you think that we have any means whatsoever?
I don't think we have to.
Do you think we have any means whatsoever that could possibly monitor our biosystems?
Right. I was going to say, I don't think we have to have a government agency do that for us anymore. We have enough podcasts out there giving out interviews. We carry cell phones in our pockets.
Did you see the new Apple Watch? What it can do?
Oh yeah.
It's a biosensor.
Yep.
It's a wearable biosensor, and everybody wears them, and everyone's worried because someone's going to get their name or their address off of Facebook. For God's sake, guys, you're giving them your medical data.
The last Android one, the one that came out a few years ago, was able to do the same thing, and it decreased a lot of users.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But it also had all these reports saying like, oh, so-and-so's life was saved because it detected they were going into an arrhythmia.
Exactly. And that's how they're selling it. They're selling it based upon the fear factor.
Yeah.
If it can stop me from having sleep apnea, if it can stop me from doing this, if it can measure my weight loss and tell me when I'm going to ovulate, I want this thing. This is amazing. Meanwhile, someone's probably sitting up there at the, what is the name of the thing? All domain anomaly resolution.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man, but I think that I can't wait till next week where we wrap all this up and throw in some personal observations.
So everybody who's listened to these last 2 weeks, we really appreciate you guys hanging in there, because this has been a lot of data. This has been a true data dump, and we've tried to pour it all out there for you guys in a digestible way so that next week we are able to go through all of this information. We're going to have a conversation about what it all means and the implications that it can have. It's going to be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to the episode. If you guys are listening to us over on YouTube, remember to give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. We're so close to being able to hit one of our goals that it's not funny. And you guys who are listening right now, if you just share with some of your friends who are interested in this UFO stuff, or even some of your friends who don't know where they sit with the whole UFO UAP topic. If you're a fan of the show, then you've listened to these last 2 episodes. We've just given you data. Yeah, we've thrown in a couple quips and our own opinions on some of that data dispersed amongst it here. But we just gave you, 75 years worth of information on the UAP phenomena. And it's all just data. Give this to your friends who might be skeptical. Get them engaged in the conversation with you using this show. It's going to be easy to do because they're not going to be able to reject most of this because this is public knowledge now. You can go look it up. It's right there. It's going to be on the Director of National Security's website, the CIA's website, the all these different government agencies. It's all published out there, and we've put up all the links. We've done the work for you. This can also help some of your family members who are having a hard time trying to understand it.
A lot of people have these experiences, Joe. We know we've met them at some of our conferences that we've gone to. We've had multiple people come up to us and actually tell us these stories, actually crying at times, being very emotional about some of the things that they've experienced and thanking us for trying to explain it or possibly explain it, to which we just say, hey, this is all available knowledge. Just do a little research, right? But so many don't know where to do that. They don't know how to do that. So,
but yeah, guys, feel free, share this one around with your friends. If you don't share any of our other episodes with anybody else, these past 2 are ones you're definitely going to want to hand out. And again, thank you to all you guys that listen to us week in, week out over on the audio side. If you want to get the links to these documents, they're going to be listed in below in the show notes, but you can actually pause and read because we're injecting them into the video feed. So if you just hop over to YouTube for these couple episodes just to see that, we'd be grateful because it's also going to help boost us up over there as well. And again, thank you all. Thank you. You guys are great. Thanks for hanging out with us these last 2 episodes. We know that's all data heavy. They're hard to set through sometimes, but this is important information and it's going to be valuable. We need this out there. You guys need to understand what's going on. And this isn't conspiracy theory. No, this is public knowledge.
Yep. It's not. It's just sitting down and actually looking at the news for what it is, rather than just reading it as entertainment. That's what's happening. And Ike Faber, don't worry, the news will return shortly.
Yes, next week the news does return. Ike, we got you covered, brother. So yeah, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate you guys. We've got another week of this lined up, but again, next week is going to be kind of more staged like a traditional episode, where we're going to be talking and summing up a lot of this stuff and sharing our theories, our thoughts, and then getting into a little bit of the fun stuff, which is speculation and what that could mean. So again, like, share, subscribe, share it with all your friends, tell everybody about it, and stay wild and weird, because if you don't, the news is.